I think my problem is I've got a constant need to buy guitars. I have a guitar addiction. I am a guitar addict. So it's difficult to justify now spending huge amounts of money on these things. You don't have to hide how much you paid for it from your partner. And I know a lot of people do that, and I've certainly never told my partner how much I paid for a guitar, unless it was really cheap, and I go to great pains to explain how cheap it was. When it's hanging on the wall, when you walk past, you'll still be perving on it, just like you would if it was a Gibson. I know that because I've been doing it for the last few days. I go, oh, look at that. If you want a Les Paul Custom without any baggage, I'd seriously recommend you get one of these before the prices go up. It's actually now all the Les Paul Custom that I'll ever need. It's great. I love it. Hello everyone, thanks for joining us. It's good to see you. Today, we're going to look at another affordable version of a hugely expensive Gibson icon, which is, of course, the Les Paul Custom. So I've gone and bought myself an Epiphone inspired by Gibson Les Paul Custom in Arctic White, as you can see here. And what a thing of beauty it is too. I think you'll agree. This comes in several colours actually. I've had my eye on one of these, getting the Epiphone Les Paul Custom for a while, okay? In the past, I've had the Gibson variant. I've had a few actually. I'll talk about that later on towards the end when I do the summing up, because I think it'll be interesting. Well, I hope it'll be interesting to give you a perspective on, you know, what I feel about this compared to what I felt about those. I've had a custom shop, like right up there, expensive one, as well as some of the standard customs, if that makes any sense. But we'll talk about that later. Yeah, I've been thinking about this one for a while, and I've been looking at them, and you can obviously get the ebony one, which looks fantastic. You can get a Koa one, which looks awesome. And I really fancy, but I didn't get that because it's Koa and not mahogany, and traditionally they're made of mahogany. And then there's the new Jerry Cantrell Wino Red version for a couple of £100 more. Includes a hard case and some sexy pickups. Really fancied that. However, at the end of the day, I plumped for this Arctic White specifically so that I could do this. More of that later. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a proper deep dive look at this guitar, which means we're going to go through all the specs, and then we're going to take it apart and have a look underneath and see what the wiring's like and all that. All of it, you know, all of that stuff. But of course, not everyone's interested in that. So if that includes you, don't forget the timestamps are all in the description box, so you can leap forward to something that interests you specifically. You do not have to sit through all my yakking unless you want to. Okay, so check the description box and leap forward to, you know, hear what it sounds like or see what the neck measurements are or whatever it is that interests you. If, however, you've got a little bit of time on your hands, you know, go and grab a drink and join me as we get all nerdy over an Epiphone Les Paul Custom. Right, so street price of this in the UK, it's June 2022, incidentally, as I'm making this. I don't know when you're watching, it could be years in the future. But anyway, now we're lucky enough to be able to buy this for £569 street price. And I say that because I know the prices ain't going to go down, you know. So if you're going to watch this in a year's time, you're going, bloody hell, I wish I'd bought one then. Well, you should have done, quite frankly, because at the moment you can get one for £569 street price in the UK, $729 in the US, Sweetwater have got it up for. However, price matching allows you to get a little bit off of that if you've got the cheek to ask, which I always have. So I popped into my local shop, actually. I went to a real shop to buy this. Yeah, I went into PMT Southend, saw my mates there, Matt and the crew there. Hugely helpful, as always, as pretty much any dealer will do if you ask. If you ask them to price match it, they will. And someone was selling one for £535, so that's what I got it for. Right, so all about the guitar. This is made of mahogany body and a mahogany neck. Now, talking about the body, it's a Les Paul. It should have a maple cap, shouldn't it? This doesn't have a maple cap. Now, I didn't know that until I was just doing my research, because modern Les Paul Customs, Gibson Les Paul Customs, have a maple cap, like all Les Pauls. Bit of history about the Les Paul Custom. When it was introduced in 1954, it was, unlike the other Les Pauls at the time, the Custom had a solid mahogany body. It didn't have a maple cap on it, okay? And that stayed like that until, I mean, they took it out of production for a while, reintroduced it in 1968, and at that point, they put a maple cap on it for some reason. And most Gibson Les Paul Customs since then have had a maple cap on. So I assumed this one would as well, but I was intrigued to find out that it doesn't. This is a solid mahogany, the Epiphone. So this little beauty here is actually more vintage correct than the Gibsons, which I love. I love that. I love that. So moving on, the neck obviously is mahogany as well, as I've said. It's got an ebony fingerboard. Ebony fingerboard. Medium jumbo frets. Oh, it's 12-inch radius, by the way. 24 3/4-inch scale length, like all Gibsons? Most Gibsons. All Gibsons. Well, we'll go most Gibsons. Graphtec nut. Grover Rotomatic. 18:1 ratio. Tuners. There you go. Beautiful gold hardware, obviously. Beautiful 5-ply binding around the body there. And it's not, I mean, I can tell you, it's all, there aren't any ridges, is what I'm trying to say. I say that because of the colour, it looks perhaps like there might be. I think you'll see what I mean, but there aren't. It's all smooth as a baby's or whatever. Obviously, it's got a fairly robust polyurethane lacquer, you know, which would cover joins, but it's well made. There aren't any ridges on this. There's no ridges on the neck here. The sort of thing that you might find on a Gibson. Yeah, it's all good. And I'm just feeling the old, yeah, I mean, the frets feel great as well. We'll have a closer look at those in a bit. They look really well finished, actually. So, yeah. Okay, and then the neck, you know, it's got this weird Epiphone D-shaped, fairly thin, they call it a slim taper. It's fairly flat and fairly, when you pick it up, or when I picked it up first time, it's the one thing you go, oh, slightly disappointing, you know, because I want it to be a little bit meatier, a bit more of a handful. But I must say, you get used to it really quickly and it's not an issue at all. So, you know, it's just the thing, the one thing that I dislike, I will say I dislike about a lot of the Epiphone inspired by Gibsons is the neck is a little bit underwhelming. Some of them aren't, like the Coronet's not, and obviously the Les Paul Special is not. You know, they've got great necks on. Even the 50s is a little bit chunkier, but this one, I suppose it's, you know, it's meant to be thin. Anyway, that's just that. Let's actually have a look at the specs and see what I'm talking about. So here's the neck measurements and profile at the first fret. You can see the sort of a flat D, it's quite pronounced. And here's the neck profile and measurements at the 12th fret. Okay, so let's crack on. What we'll do now is we'll whip the strings off and have a closer look. Ebony fingerboard. It's as good as it gets, isn't it? A little bit dry, could probably do with a little bit of a wipe. Same with the frets, a little bit dusty, but apart from that, really nicely finished. No sharp edges. Looks really tidy. I'll do some close-ups of that so you can see those fret ends. All looks good. No nasty tooling marks on the binding. And as I said, there's no ridges or anything. Graph Tech nut. They're always well cut, really, aren't they? I think they just come like that, don't they? Okay, quick look at the hardware. We've got your lock tone, your locking. It's got these little metal tabs on to keep it in place, which is pretty good design, actually. And that's just branded Epiphone and weighs the standard 71 grams. So we can pop that back on without fear of it falling off. And here's the Epiphone ABR1 style, again, lock tone, or is it tone lock? I'm not sure. But it's the standard ABR1 style bridge, which is, 45 grams. Now, I'll tell you what I did do, because I've still got an SG custom, and I changed the bridge on that because they come with the Nashville style Tune-o-matic, which is this one. This is the one that I had in my box it's on the wall back there. I'll show you the difference. That's the ABR1 style, and that's the Nashville style. You can see the difference there. The Nashville style is fatter. Hopefully you can see that. You will also see that the holes are different because the Gibson posts are smaller than the import ones, which we've discussed numerous times before, so I'm not going to go into that now. I just wanted to show you that while I could, really. There you go. Let's pop that back, and now let's weigh it. Now, I was quite fussy about not getting a heavy one of these, which is why I went into the shop to try it, because I didn't want to end up with a 10-pounder, because as you'll hear later, the Gibson ones that I've had, most of them have been too heavy, which is why I haven't got them still. So let's weigh this and see how I did. So I was guessing that this one was about 9 pounds. So let's see. How about that? 9 pounds pretty much. Or 4.11 kilograms. There you go. And now let's take the pickups up and have a look at inside and in the wiring, but we'll also be able to see if we can see a maple cap, if someone was selling fibs, but I don't think we will. Okay, so I'm just looking at this. It's inconclusive. I mean, you can't say, oh, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't have a maple cap. The specs tell us it doesn't. Closer look inside those cavities. It looks to me to have several layers of timber. That's what it looks like to me. but beyond that, I can't really shed any more light. I'm afraid. I don't know what I expected. Anyway, that's what it looks like. Okay, and there's the pickups. Pro Bucker 2 G. I have no idea what G means. HB humbucker, N the neck, 4-2 don't know, and the other one PB3 Pro Bucker 3 G. No idea. HB humbucker, B for bridge, 4-2. Well, that's what I think I know. CTS pots, plug-in connectors for the pickups and stuff. Nothing fancy in the capacitor department. Looks like a Switchcraft style switch, if it's not an actual Switchcraft one. Lovely metal, gold-plated jack plate. Lovely Les Paul custom, bell-shaped, 3-screw truss rod cover, and it looks pretty clean, and it's just the Allen wrench style one that they have on these Epiphones rather than the Gibson bell end ones. Okay, let's put all this, screw all this back together, put some strings on, tune it up, plug it in, and see what it sounds like. See you in a minute. Okay, we're back. New set of strings, tuned up, ready to go. But before we do that, I realised I forgot to take the pickup readings. So let's do that now. All controls on 10. And that one there. And on the neck first. 7.8 kilo ohms. 4.39 Henrys. And on the bridge, 8.48 kilo ohms, 4.84 Henrys. So there you go. Now also, I realise what G means. You know, in that indecipherable code on the back of the pickups, it said G clearly stands for gold, doesn't it? Gold. As opposed to, I think sometimes they have N there, which would be nickel, wouldn't it? Gold, nickel. There you go. I wasn't really with it this morning, but I'm catching up. Now, let's play it. Here we are. I've been messing around with amps, and in honour of the Jonesy, I've dug out, I've got this old Fender Twin Reverb. Have a look at this. This is it's a bit of a mutt, I think. It's kind of a 70s chassis, I think, and it might have a modified or an upgraded internals. I don't really know, to be honest with you. I bought it fairly cheap. This is the mad 135 watt version, apparently. So I don't know a lot about it, but I bought it because it looked really cool, and it sounds, wow. These are phenomenal things. You can hear it's a bit noisy. Sorry about that. We'll have to put up with that today, I think. But it sounds sort of like this. Just clean, obviously. On the board, I've got all the signal chains. Look, it's in the description box. Put a little bit of compression on it. There's no pedals on at the moment. But it's really nice, isn't it? It's got a nice kind of... I mean, very few people are going to play a Les Paul custom clean, are they? Most people are going to do this. Klon KTR. I've also got a Super Overdrive SD1, and I've also got a Maestro Fuzz. They're all off at the moment. This is what it sounds like with the Klon. I was trying to recreate the Jonesy sort of sound, obviously, so this is as close as I've got, I think. Something like that. That's obviously just with one pedal. If you start putting other things on. Well, this is more about the pedals than the guitar, obviously. But, you know, you got... a fuzz. And that's what the guitar sounds like without any interference. So the controls all seem to work pretty well. Always say, to get the most out of rolling the tone back, you do need a little bit of overdrive. You can coax some nice noises out of it. Sounds great, doesn't it? Sounds great. I mean, and it feels great. Really, really enjoyed playing this week. And I think it shows. Sometimes I really struggle to play. And sometimes it just comes easy, and I don't really have a problem. Just, you know, knowing what I'm going to do and stuff. And this week is one of those weeks where I've actually thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure rather than a chore. And I know that sounds daft, but occasionally it can be a bit painful, and it's hard to know how much the guitar really influences that. But it must have quite a significant influence on, you know, what's going on in here. So as far as this Epiphone Les Paul Custom goes, it's bloody brilliant. You know, and you don't need to look much further if you want a Les Paul Custom and you want that experience of being able to say, yeah, I've got a Les Paul Custom. I mentioned earlier, I've had several Les Paul Customs. I've had three Gibson Les Paul Customs, actually, since I started getting into guitars again in about 2015, properly, seriously buying them. I got one of these 2016, $3,500 it cost, interest-free credit. And it was lovely. And I remember the feeling that I got, and I remember, you know, going online and Googling Les Paul Custom and reading all the wonderful things that people say about them and how I'd finally arrived as a guitar player now that I was good enough to own such a wonderful guitar. And there's a lot of that in the experience of owning something like this. Well, let's say the Gibson version of this. But it doesn't come without its problems and downsides and niggling doubts, which are, at that time, the Gibson version of this had a rich light fingerboard, so it wasn't even an ebony fingerboard. And that's a niggling doubt rather than necessarily a problem. But it was also bloody heavy. You know, that one weighed in at over 10 pounds. And it did sound good, but it also cost $3,500. And although I didn't intend this review to turn into a Gibson versus Epiphone, I mean, it must be said that the difference in feel and sound, as I've said a lot of times, and a lot of people don't believe me, but the difference in feel and sound between an Epiphone and a Gibson version of whatever guitar it is, isn't necessarily big enough to justify that big difference and those niggling doubts. And anyway, I sold the white one after a couple of years because those niggling doubts didn't go away. It was heavy. I didn't pick it up very often. Didn't play it very often. Every time I did, I thought, oh yeah, that's great. I put it down again. I couldn't play it with my band because actually after holding it for an hour, your back starts to hurt, or mine does because I'm old. So, you know, I didn't play it. Eventually I sold it and I lost over £1,000 cash money on that. And since then I've owned a couple of others. I then, for some reason or other, I ended up buying an ebony Les Paul Custom. Same story with that, really. And then I bought a ridiculously expensive Custom Shop 68 reissue, which was relict. And I bought that on interest-free credit, £4,800. Can you believe I paid for that? They're selling now for bloody silly money, like £6,000 upwards or something like that. But that was a really nice work of art guitar. I mean, I can't say anything bad about that. The relic job was pretty authentic. It was light. It wasn't much over £8. It was a fabulous guitar, but it didn't get played. A huge amount of money tied up in something that you don't play. Unless you're a dentist or a lawyer, you know, what you're thinking of. Again, I ended up selling that one and losing a fair amount of money into the bargain, and hopefully learning my lesson not to buy ridiculously expensive guitars. I'm not knocking the Gibson version, and I'm not knocking anyone that owns and enjoys the Gibson version. Some people do it sensibly, and it adds up for them. I'll get them examples. Paul Stafford Cook, who's a great YouTuber, great player, and he's got a really nice tight collection of custom shop guitars that I'll put a link to one of his latest videos where he's actually playing them all beautifully. And that's perfect because he's not an addict like me. He doesn't need to keep on buying them. You know, he's just got one of those iconic guitars, and they're great sounding, great looking guitars. And he'll hold on to them long enough that he won't lose money on them. He probably will never sell them. I think that's what they're designed for, not for people like me. I think my problem is I've got a constant need to buy guitars. I have a guitar addiction. I am a guitar addict, and I need to buy guitars. And the buzz comes from buying something and owning it. And most of the time, the guitars don't get played very much because I've got such a large collection. So it's difficult to justify now spending huge amounts of money on these things. And when there are things like this Epiphone as alternatives, and I personally don't need to have Gibson on the headstock for all of my guitars. I mean, I couldn't live without it on some, and I still need that, you know, affirmation that I've got something which is purported to be top quality, top draw, you know, handmade, go USA, you know, the bollocks, if you like. But I'm more than happy, very happy, to discover the alternatives that everyone can afford. Well, not everyone, obviously, but hopefully most of us can afford. For £535, I must say I get more enjoyment out of this than I did from the one that I paid £3,500 for. Because, as I've said before, there's no baggage, you know. You don't have to hide how much you paid for it from your partner, perhaps, you know, or for instance. And I know a lot of people do that, and I've certainly never told my partner how much I've paid for a guitar, unless it was really cheap, and I go to great pains to explain how cheap it was. You know, I used to have to do that. I don't have to now because it's a business. So, you know, I'd recommend any of you starting a YouTube channel because you will not ever have to have an excuse to buy a guitar ever again. So pretty much why I did this, honestly. So it's been a real pleasure to now buy my fourth Les Paul Custom and not have any baggage attached to it and say, well, actually, it sounds pretty much as good as any of those others. It's got great pickups in this. It's got the Pro Buckers in, the Pro Bucker 2 and the Pro Bucker 3 in this one. And if you're in any doubt as to how good Pro Buckers are, check out my recent comparison video. I'm doing that because it's there. Look, it's there now. Where I compared Pro Buckers, Burst Buckers, Anaco Classics, and some custom wound PAFs. These are great. Don't let anyone tell you that Pro Buckers will need replacing, because they don't. We discovered that much, to our surprise and delight. So these are great pickups, and the guitar's great, and it's all great, isn't it? Look, it's great. The wiring works great. It's well made. It's got an ebony fingerboard. It's a real brilliant. It's brilliant, and it does Sex Pistols riffs, and probably Stereophonics, and maybe a bit of Darkness as well. But it's a great guitar, and it's actually now all the Les Paul custom that I'll ever need. And all right, I'm fortunate enough to be able to put that into perspective because I've owned others. I sold them all. I won't feel the need to sell this. Plus, I don't know if there is a plus, I'm just paused for thought. Plus, this is a nice little device actually. If I get lost for words, I can go plus, and then I can cut back in with something else. Rather than saying I tend to say quite a lot. Plus, fuck. So again, I'm just going to reiterate, I'm not suggesting that this will replace the feeling you'd get from owning a Gibson one. My experience is that feeling didn't last very long. If you can afford to do it, do. And if you're going to, play it a lot, do. If you've got a strong back, get a Gibson, or make sure that you try and get a light one. Most of them aren't light, probably because they've got the maple cap on. Obviously the custom shop, I know they're all made by custom shop, but the ones that they call custom shop, i.e. the 4 grand plus ones, because I say that, no, the normal standard Les Paul customs are 4 grand now or more, if you can get them. And the custom shop ones are up that. But obviously they choose lighter bits of wood. Okay, so and they sprinkle magic on it as well, don't they? Little custom shop fairy dust. Don't forget that. But you know what? Epiphone have got their own little pot of fairy dust out there in China where this is made. This is obviously Epiphone make these in China, and they do a damn fine job. I don't care what anyone says. And I know there's a lot of support for that in the industry. Someone who I really respect on YouTube is obviously Philip McKnight, and it's really satisfying to hear him talk about guitars and how well they're made, in China and Indonesia and stuff, and how there's little to separate, the manufacturing process, at least, from the USA ones. All right, we know that materials in the US are different and probably better, but that's what you're paying an extra 3 grand for. So, yeah, if you want a Les Paul custom without any baggage, I seriously recommend you get one of these before the prices go up, because they're great, and you can play punk rock on them, and you look really cool. Well, you will, I don't, but and I'll be honest with you, when it's hanging on the wall, when you walk past, you'll still be perving on it, just like you would if it was a Gibson. I know that because I've been doing it for the last few days. I go, oh, look at that. That's a sexy looking guitar. And it is. It's great. I love it. There you go. That's all for this week. Thanks very much for joining us and in putting up with all that. Come and see what we're up to next week. It'll be something else. Don't know what it is yet. I've got an inkling, but I'm not going to let on, all right? It might be, I did a bit of a trade last weekend, in fact. When I bought this on Saturday, it was only last Saturday I went and bought this, I also discovered another used guitar, and I did a bit of a trade. So I might tell you about that next week. So yeah, there you go. Intrigued. Come back next week and find out what that was all about. Thank you very much for watching. As always, look forward to seeing you next time. Yeah. Cheers for now. Ta-da.